my father goes to Dej Yeshiva. Interestingly enough, he has a Rebbe in Dej, who was the son-in-law of the old Dej Rebbe. His name was Yeshua Greenwald, who later on became the Rebbe of Chust. And it's really important because later on, when he comes to the United States, he joins the Chuster Rav's shul in Borough Park. But I'll just tell you that he had two rabbis there that he studied under, and he came back from yeshiva about 18, 19 years old. That's how the custom was. But he wasn't really as religious as his parents were. And in those days, Orthodox people didn't really shave. They had beards, and he wanted to shave. And it was like this, beginning of people were starting to be modern, the beginning of 20th century. And he wanted to be a little bit more modern, and he wanted to shave. And he asked his father permission to shave his beard. And his father said, "Why do you want to shave?" And he said, "I would like to shave for the honor of Shabbat, for the covered Shabbos." So his father said, "If you want to shave to look good for Shabbat, to look Shabbos, then you can do it." Then he allowed him to do that. There's another story of my father being a little bit more modern. So he's 18, 19, 20 years old. They went to a wedding. They're standing around, and 20, 21 years old, and he goes ahead and he's standing around with a bunch of boys and girls, which was pretty unusual in that area because they were observant. So boys and girls didn't really grow up talking to each other or dating or having anything to do because they didn't go to co-ed schools in those areas in that time. And even though there were modern schools and there were modern people all over Europe, but not in those towns in the town that where my father grew up. And he was at the wedding, and my grandfather went over to him and saw him. He was talking to a whole bunch of boys and girls talking to each other. He went over and gave him a patch, and he gave him a smack. And he said, and my father said, "May you be able to do this to me and teach me the right way until you're 120 years old." He said in Yiddish, "You should be able to do that to me." And all the girls clapped. And my grandfather, instead of getting angry, he smiled and he walked away. Because my father was very quick-witted and made something that was supposed to be like something that was, something that was tense. He made it very light, and all the young boys and girls were clapping because he had said that his father should have the honor to discipline him until he was 120. So that way, he's very quick-witted that way. So in that respect, he was a little bit more modern. Unfortunately, he was drafted to the Romanian army about a year later. In the geopolitical, this is already in 1939, 1940, 1938, 39, 40, when Romania, Russia, and Germany were divvying up properties. Russia gave Poland to Germany in September of 39, and that's why they invaded. And because Romania was allied with Germany at the time, in 1939, early 1939, they pressured the Romanian government there was like a standoff between Romania and Russia. In the eastern part of Romania and the western part of Ukraine and Russia, there was like a Bessarabia and Moldavia, which is today an independent country, Moldavia. But in those days, there was always a fight whether it belonged to Russia, Russia/Ukraine, or whether it belonged to Romania. And so he was drafted to the Romanian army. And it's interesting because my father's family, they weren't rich, but they were a little bit more well off than the farmers and the gypsies who had zero or nothing. So if you paid 50 lei, or whatever the Romanian currency was at the time, you got to be able to go into the cavalry. And Zaidi was very good at understanding horses, even later on in life, because he was in the cavalry. You know, when I used to take him like to Monticello Raceway, and he never really gambled on the horses, but when the horses would march out before the race, he would say, oh, this one's sick, this one's lame, this one's really healthy, and exactly what he predicted would happen. But he didn't gamble because he knew horses, and you were able to watch, you know, in these raceways, harness racing, you were able to watch these horses go by. He was in the cavalry, which likely saved his life later on. So there was a standoff between Romania and Russia over these territories, and Germany, again, this became Romania because in 1919, it was originally part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, but then they divvied up Austro-Hungarian, part of Ukraine, to part Czechoslovakia, to part Bulgaria, part Romania. And on the other side, the Sudetenland was Czechoslovakia. They took it away from Germany. So there was like a big carve out of the Austro-Hungarian. So when he really went to school, he says that this is a flashback to when he was like 9, 10, 11, 12 years old. He really didn't like school. He wasn't like a studious person, and then particularly because they used to go. They came in the morning to yeshiva, like 5 in the morning. They would learn, then they would pray and daven, and then they would learn again until 9 o'clock. Then they would go to the non-Jewish school because it was compulsory education to Romanian school. But he was not really a great student, and he really wanted to get kicked out. So he took an egg and he like smeared it on the walls of the classroom, and the teacher came to his mother and said, there's no way we can keep this kid. So then he went back to yeshiva, which was not unusual for a 12, 13-year-old boy to leave elementary school, secular studies at that time. And he went back to yeshiva, and then to continue the story, he was engaged, came back, he's now in the Romanian army. So there was a standoff, and my father said that...
Can you talk about the experiences in the army, like...
Oh yeah, he told us, he used to tell me, he said, what takes you so long to get dressed? We had 120 seconds by the time the bugle sounded, and we had to have our uniform and our gear together, like 2 minutes, washing up, getting dressed, standing on it at attention. Literally 2-3 minutes, and that was it. And you had to be finished.
Did his parents say anything about, you know, the army? Did he bring anything interesting about the army?
Well, he said that it was not an easy life, but he was in the cavalry. He wasn't in the infantry, so it saved his life in a way, and I'll tell you why. Because what happened was that Hitler made Romania capitulate to Russia, and so on one side of the river, that was separated by a river, they were camped near a river. One side was Russia, and one side was Romania. And all of a sudden, during one night, while they were camped against each other, Zaidi realized, and they all realized that there were a whole bunch of boats coming in the middle of the night, rowboats from the Russian side to the Romanian side of the river. And the boats, they were looking, and they didn't have soldiers on them. It was just like young women, young girls, young women, ages 17, 18, 19, 20, young, attractive women that were coming in the boats. And they would come from the Russia side to the Romanian side. Of course, the Romanian soldiers defied their officers. It was the middle of the night, they didn't see. And some of the people went on the boat to go to the girls. And Zaidi said, whoever went on the boat, and then they rowed back into the middle of the river. And Zaidi said, whoever went on those boats never came back. So it was just like a ploy to get the soldiers to come in, and then the Russian soldiers, and then the Russian women brought them back to the other side of the river, and they were killed. Then, so again, they made Romania capitulate, and there was supposed to be a peaceful withdrawal, but the Russians came in, and as soon as the standoff was over, it was like a standoff. It was like a 3 weeks standoff against each other, and there was like an ultimatum that Russia made, an ultimatum they called it, and Romania capitulated, and then Russia started advancing into those areas, and the Romanian soldiers were just in a disarray, because there was supposed to be a peaceful withdrawal. They were supposed to withdraw, but the Russians came in and started killing the Romanian soldiers, and they had to run away. And Zaidi had a friend who was not Jewish, who was together with him in the cavalry, and he got killed. But the Russians were killing the Jewish people as well.
And he took his stuff.
Well,
right?
wait, he got killed. He was killing, and he had to run away. So what he did was he wanted to take his friend's dog tags and thing was not Jewish, because he knew that he lived in a town that he was going to be passing in Romania back to his parents' house in Krasna, which was all the way. The front was on eastern Romania, the eastern border, and where they lived was almost western Romania, right next to Hungary, which was previously Hungary. And even today, there's Hungarian-speaking people in that area of Romania. So he goes back. He finally goes underground. It was in disarray, so a lot of the Romanian soldiers actually deserted from the Romanian army because nobody protected them, because the Russians started killing them. So they all left and they all deserted, and as he was taking his, he had intention to take the personal effects of his colleague that was his comrade soldier, that was, fellow soldier that was with him to see that village that was near, not far away from the road that he was going to.